What's up, tribe? How you guys doing? We are here for another episode of Making the Cut, season 1, episode 3. So go ahead and hit your subscribe button, and I hope you like this video. I'm looking for my notes. All right, I think we got them. So, as you guys know, again, this is a Prime show, so they drop 2 episodes a week. So we have episode 3 and episode 4, and on this week's episode, they decided that the mini collection was going to be a collaboration, and they said, that's a new trend that's going on. They gave the example of Supreme and Louis Vuitton and Vivienne Westwood and Burberry, and I'm sure they could have gone on and on and on. And as we have learned through Project Runway, group challenges are always horrible with. I feel like on all of these shows, I feel like it's always worse with designers, and I think it's even worse with these group of designers because they are so established and they are so advanced in their own careers. Like with Project Runway, at least the way it used to be, a lot of these people were amateurs. They had not really, they didn't have their own labels and they didn't have their own stores, and they didn't, like I said before, a lot of them were just coming out of school and stuff. And so it was a hard thing, but I think for this situation and this opportunity, I think it was even more intense. So the groups were, we had Johnny and Megan, and they purposely put people together that had opposite sort of styles. And Johnny has the hard leather, and Megan very tailored, but she's very I would say her client is probably like, she could do business like high-end business, like CEO, female CEO type business, but also country club mama. Yeah, I know what I'm saying? Okay. Sabado and Sander, again, we know that Sabado is very soft. He uses very soft materials, very elegant, very I don't know. Every time I see his stuff come down the runway, I just hear classical music, and you know what I'm saying. And then Sander is young and hard and in your face. He's the one with the don't. Wasn't he the one with the donut dress? I think I'm almost certain that was him. Then we have Will and we have Esther. Haven't seen a lot from Will, so I don't really know a lot of Will's aesthetic. But Esther, we know, is very hard and um, very funky, very funky. Her style. Troy and Josh. Again, we have not seen a lot from Troy. We learned a lot about Troy in this episode, but we hadn't seen a lot from Troy. And Josh, we learned about him. I'm gonna get to that in a minute. And then we have Renault and we have G. And we know G is sporty. That's the one that had the partnership with Adidas. So that's an example of a collaboration. So you would think that she knows what that's like, so to speak. I mean, certainly her design house wasn't on the level of a Supreme or Louis Vuitton, but she knows what it's like to collaborate with another brand. So they put them together, and again, this isn't like Project Runway where they all go to Mood together and they all do this and they all do that. Once they give them their assignment, they pretty much give them the freedom until it's runway time. Tim does come through and do the critiques, but this week was the first time that I feel like I got a Project Runway critique. The first 2 episodes, he listened and you could see that he was stifling himself to not say a whole lot. Like he really, really was really letting the designers to do their thing. He was really just there to kind of make sure they were going in the right direction, but he was not giving them a whole lot of suggestions of, well, I would do this if I were you, and I would do that. But in this episode, we saw a lot of that in this episode when he came through to do the critiques, because the idea was that you collaborate, but you couldn't see, almost like you're creating a third aesthetic without losing your own way. Hard to describe. So, for example, Johnny and Megan. It looked like Johnny made the top, Megan made the bottom, or vice versa, and they just put it together as an outfit. And Tim was like, no, we're not supposed to be able to look at it and see it. We're supposed to look at it and say, wow, they collaborated and created something totally different, bringing their own skill set. Does that make sense? So he said that a lot as he went through the workroom. His biggest critique for everybody was that everything looked so disjointed. He kept calling them Frankenstein because he was like, you could almost see the stitching of where you put yours with mine and we just stitched it together. And so let's talk about these groups for a second, Hanny. So first of all, Johnny and Megan, both by their own admission, very strong-willed, control freaks, and they sort of butt heads after the critique because Johnny felt like Megan sort of threw him under the bus when Tim came through. But what I like is that he said it. Because his thing was, well, wait a minute, I feel like she just threw me under the bus. Is that what she's going to do when it's time for critiques? Hold up. Let me let her know that I ain't really feeling that. And he told her, and he said, I kind of feel like you kind of threw me under the bus a little bit with Tim. And she was like, no. She was like, wait a minute, hold up, let's talk about this. And what I like is that they were able to have an adult conversation. They were able to handle it as adults, and they were able to move past it and get the collection done. When you work with people, you're going to butt heads. There's going to be moments. But I really like the fact that they were able to talk through it and move past it. And so for that was great. Sabado and Sander. Now, we learned a lot about Sabado in this episode. We learned that Sabado was once a high fashion model in his younger days. Now, Sabado looks like he's probably in his 60s, 70s maybe. So we're talking about maybe the 1960s, 1970s. But they showed some pictures, baby. Sabado was hot. Oh, Sabado was fine. Okay? Like, fine. But he said that he changed the trajectory of his life when I think he had to raise his son. I think he explained what happened with the mother, but he ended up having to raise his son. And he said, he had to change his life. Like, he couldn't be a model traveling all over the world anymore. He had to figure something out. And so from that point forward, he became a designer and probably used the connections that he had through being a model to sort of, parlay himself into the world of design. Now, Sabado, I gave Sabado too much credit, y'all. I found out in this episode. I was giving him credit for being on top of his stuff and knowing how to cut pattern and getting his tech bag ready and stuff. Not so much. Sabado is not, he can't cut patterns and he hasn't sewn. He's a designer. He does not sew. And so Sander, this young guy with spunk, but what I like about Sander was Sander clearly was looking at Sabado like the old man that, I got saddled with the old man, but I thought he was being shady. I thought he was kind of like throwing shade at Sabado, like, oh, this old man. But he really wasn't. Like, it was a point where Sabado got done first. Well, at least they thought he had got done first. And he was upstairs on his phone. And, Sander kind of looked and was like, okay, I guess he's just tired. Like, he needed a little bit more time. It's all good. He was like, what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to let this collaboration fuck up my opportunity. And so if I had to pick up the slack, I just got to pick up the slack. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to push forward and I'm going to make it work. And so, again, I'm waiting for this big blow up. I'm waiting for Sander to get, start talking about he's not pulling his weight and he's not doing this and he's not doing that. And it never happened. He was just like, all right, well, I'm going to make it happen. And Sabado even made a mistake where he did the tech bag wrong, where for the seamstresses, they were supposed to do 2 separate bags, but Sabado put everything in one bag. So when they came back the next day, the sewing hadn't been done. And even then, and you could tell he felt so bad. He was like, I made a mistake. I'm so sorry. Sander was like, it's all good. He said, look, this is what I need you to do. You go do X, Y, and Z, and I'll do A, B, and C, and we just gonna make it happen. And they just put their heads down, and they worked. And I, again, appreciate that. I really thought that was really cool. Will and Esther, they didn't really give us a lot about their situation. I mean, they made it work, right? They made it work. Troy and Josh, we learned a little bit more. Remember I told y'all, I didn't even hardly see Troy, so we got a little bit about Troy. Troy is an instructor at Parsons. I think he said he works part-time or he's adjunct or something to that effect. And that's the money he uses to fuel. Of course, he has his, with Sabado has had 2 clothing lines. He had the first one, and then now he has one that's his name. Troy has a clothing line. They all have clothing lines, honey. They all have their own clothing line, I see. And he said, but at the end of the day, I'm still living at home with my mama, my room / studio. Like it's a very humble situation with me. He said, but I grew up, and basically he grew up in the hood, and dad left the house, and mom had to do what mom had to do, and so he comes from very humble beginnings, and so that was the so that's Troy's story. But Troy is he said he's very tailored. You know what I mean? He has a very tailored approach to things. Josh, on the other hand, is the total opposite. Josh is young, and he had a moment where he was talking about his tattoos, and he was saying, people get tattoos for two reasons. He was like, either, I forgot the first thing he said. He said, or it's not a good look. People automatically think that people with tattoos are dangerous, and so it's a good defense to keep people away and people don't talk to you. And so then he sort of had a moment where he sort of broke down a little bit. I'm sure they edited it because they didn't really get into it, so I wasn't quite sure what that was about. But yeah, and so Josh doesn't know how to cut. He's from Columbus, Ohio, but he's been living in China the last few years, and he's been very successful with his brand over in China. It's something Ghost, and it's real funky. His stuff is real funky, and it looked cool. But he said that the majority of his business, he has a business partner, and a lot of their business is over in Asia, and does really, really well over in Asia. So, all right, let's get into some of these looks. Okay, let's get into some of these looks. Johnny and Megan, and they had to do two looks again, and of course one was supposed to be more, high fashion, and the other one everyday wear. Their whole collection was black and white. However, it was black and white, but it wasn't overly matchy. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't all the same pattern. It wasn't all the same look. They had three looks. I'm sorry, they had to do three looks. They had three looks. But it definitely was a great mixture of their aesthetic after Tim gave them the critique, and they took it in, and they totally embodied the critique and came back with something great. They did the leather pants, and then she had her blazer with the shoulders, the way she did the shoulders. It was beautiful. I like Megan's work. I feel like Megan is not getting as much attention right now, but I definitely like Megan's work. She told us a little bit of her story. She said, that she has been in the industry, and as a African American woman in the industry, she said, look, I've had to just kind of put my head down and make it happen. Oh, excuse me. Sorry, y'all. Renault and Juan, I wrote okay. Again, you could see how they mixed their aesthetic. You could see the sportiness coming from Juan, but it was okay. Like, it didn't wow me, but it wasn't horrible, but it didn't wow me. Esther and Will, they had a black and red. It was way too matchy. Like, everything was black and red, and it was three different outfits, but it really looked almost the same, and it didn't have that same level of execution that we're used to from Esther from the last 2 weeks. Now, remember, I wasn't crazy about the actual, like, design of some of her stuff, but it was all, like, the first challenge with that stuff she threw together in 2 hours, I was like, wow. Last week, I wasn't crazy about the dress as far as something I would wear, but it definitely was a well-made design. You know what I'm saying? But I did not like their mini collection at all. It was too matchy, and it looked very dated. It just looked like something. And I'm working on the pictures. Okay. I can't read my own handwriting. Troy and Josh. I wrote a mismatch sloppy mess. They were going for the different pattern look. Like, you see people that wear polka dot and stripes, or a argyle design and paisley or something like that. Like, they were going for that mixed match pattern, but even in the mixed match and the craziness of the mixed patterns, there's still some symmetry, but theirs was horrible. it was just a mess. It was a hot buttered mess. It was terrible. Sabado and Sander, they had this. The highlight of their collection was this black dress with the big bow on the back. It was gorgeous. I thought it was great. Their whole collection was black. You could definitely see how both of them had their input in it, and it was great. I thought it was wonderful. Now, we get to the judging. Okay, the judging was it was a little interesting this week, right? So the top was Megan and Johnny, Sabado and Sander. And I believe Megan and Johnny won this week, I believe. And they really felt like that Johnny took their criticism and totally embodied their criticism and made some adjustments. And see, on these shows, that's what the judges want to see. The judges want to see that you took the criticism, you took in the criticism, and you executed and you made a difference so that they could see that you. So the biggest thing they told him to do was, figure out a different way to do the leather so that it doesn't always look so hard, and maybe move away from the leather jacket. So he didn't do a leather jacket, still did the leather pants, kept to his aesthetic, but they weren't so hard. They almost looked like the stretch pants that people are wearing with like this, that has the sheer peekaboo sections, almost look like that. So they did talk to Johnny and Megan, and they were honest that they had, a little hiccup, but they worked it out. They talked to Sabado and Sander, and they talked about, how they work together and everything. Then they got to the bottom, honey, and they told Esther and Will they weren't crazy about it. They said it was too matchy. They did not like it. Then they got to Troy and Josh, and this is where it got interesting. They got to critiquing and talking about what they didn't like and how bad it was and how sloppy it was. Oh, they gave it to him. Oh, I mean, and Heidi, Heidi can be, woo, when Heidi doesn't like something or she thinks that you did a terrible job with something, oh, Heidi knows how to, and so Heidi was very clear about she did not like it. She thought it was sloppy and all these things. So they tell Josh, you didn't make the cut, right? So Josh, but they didn't tell him that. They were getting ready to, and Josh said, you know what? I just want to say this. This guy was a great guy. Troy is a great guy. Troy, he didn't do anything wrong, and da-da-da-da-da, and blah, 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 blah. And you know what? I think my time has come. I think it's time for me to go home. So, of course, the judges were like, what? And he was like, yeah, I just think it's my time. And Heidi was like, well, we can't want it more than you want it, so thanks for coming through, right? And so then they turned to Troy and they were like, well, to be honest with you, we were planning on sending both of y'all home. We already told y'all that everybody doesn't make that. It's not just a one elimination situation, and both of y'all would get ready to go home. So basically, why should we change our mind? Baby, Troy broke that thing all the way down. Okay, he played his case to the point where he was crying, and he said it. He was like, I want to be here. This is what I've done. This is what I didn't do. I know these are the mistakes that I made. Blah 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 blah. He did it. Like, he said all the right stuff, honey. So then they go through and they ask, do you think have you changed your mind? You know how they go through the judges. And Naomi said, you know what? She said, I do want to see more from you. I've changed my mind. I think I'm going to give you another chance. So then they went to Nicole. Nicole said, I do want to see more from you. I've changed my mind. So then they went to Heidi. And Heidi was like, nah, I still feel like you need to go home, dog. I said, damn, Heidi. You couldn't even be. Heidi was like, So then the third judge, the guy, he said, no. He said, I think, he said, it's a lesson learned. Let's see what he can do. Let's see if he takes the lesson, And Heidi was like, well, I ain't changed my mind, but it's majority rule, 3 against 1, so you get to stay. But I said, now see, it was a very interesting, elimination. And people in my comments this week, you know, we've had a little, I've read your comments, and one person was saying how they don't like it. They don't like the elimination because they feel like everybody doesn't get a critique. They don't know whether they were at the top or the bottom. And I think that's done. I think that's done on purpose. That's to keep everybody on their toes. That's so that nobody, hopefully, nobody gets too comfortable and feel like, oh, well, I'm always in the bottom, or I'm always in the top, and so I'm good to go. I think that they do that to keep people on their toes because honestly, they talk to people, and you can kind of tell that whether they liked it or they didn't like it, but they don't tell you how close you are to the top or how close you are to the bottom. You just know who wins and who goes home. I kind of like that. So at the end of it, Heidi was kind of irritated. She was like, you know what? I'm kind of feeling like they're not taking this seriously. Like, I feel like they're not, I don't know. And so Tim was like, yeah, it seems like there's not really a sense of urgency or anything. Like, I'm not sure. So they were like, we got to shake it up. So for the second episode, they getting ready to give them a 1-day challenge where they don't get to use the seamstresses and they have to sew themselves. Now, that's going to be very interesting because we already know half of these folks can't sew. So anyway, we're going to see how that works out, y'all. Let me know what y'all think. Drop it in the comments. Peace.